Hey guys, what's up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today let's go over the market, check out how the week has closed, and next week, which is going to be, I think, an interesting week, mainly because Tesla's earnings are on Wednesday, I believe, after market close. Usually it's after market, pretty much, I think it's always been after market close, but it's Wednesday. I'm like 99% sure it's Wednesday, which is going to be pretty exciting. And the reason I'm excited is because usually right before earnings, because the market expects a big move, option premiums are juiced, like they're very high. So it's very good to sell options if you can, of course, not financial advice, whatever. Anyways, let's get into it. If you enjoy, don't forget to hit that like button. Let's get this party started. Tesla ending the day up just 0.72%, underperforming the market quite significantly because the QQQ and SPY were up almost 2% each. Closing out the day at just shy over $720. So pretty much kind of what I expected happened today, just slightly to a lesser scale. I did say how I believe in the morning we'll have a bit of a run up and then probably slowly bleed out the rest of the day, which I was fairly correct about. However, we just didn't bleed out as much as I thought. I thought we'd bleed out a little bit more than this. I thought maybe we'll go to low 700s, like, maybe like 710, 7.5, something like that. We actually stayed at 720. I don't think we'd stay up this high. I thought this would like kind of, once we broke out of this right here, I thought we would go lower. Right here. Once this happened and we broke under, I thought we would go lower and probably close around like 710. It didn't happen. Nonetheless, it doesn't matter too much. The point is the fact that I did say we'll have a run up in the morning, then probably have a very slow bleed out day because it's before the the long, not the long weekend, but it's before a weekend. Fridays are usually kind of weird days. And yeah, so for the most part, Tesla definitely underperformed today. The fact that QQQ and SPY were up pretty much 2% each, and Tesla was only up not even 1%. It's definitely a bit of an underperformance. QQ looks pretty bullish. I mean, it's actually bouncing up pretty nicely. But again, earnings week next week starts, and that's where things can get really choppy. So be really careful with next week and how this is going to start playing out. SPY is pretty much at resistance right here, pretty major resistance, the line and the blue line. So we'll see what that happens with that as well, which can affect Tesla. But nonetheless, looking at Tesla daily to start, you can see once again, we pretty much rejected around this level again, this kind of like 725 to 730 level once again, which also coincides with the blue line. We're still closing below it. It's also I forgot what the name of this candle is, but it's essentially a candle where like the open and the close is exactly the same or like extremely close. So as you can see here, right, there's like, you can pretty much see almost no parts of the candle, like like this, like any of these you can see the candle. Here you can see it's just long wicks, like shadow wicks essentially. Usually when this kind of thing happens, that signals a potential reversal. In this case, I would assume this signals that it's going to be a reversal to the downside because the past 3 days we have been ultimately green. So this tells me that this might signal a reversal. Personally, I think early next week we will have a drawdown. I think we will probably fall, probably up until earnings or something like that. So I'm expecting that to happen, or at least some form of weakness with earnings. Personally, I'm looking to sell puts early next week before Tesla's earnings, as the option premiums are juiced. So I think it's going to be quite lucrative. So we'll see what happens with that. But nonetheless, let's go over the main indicators that we like to look at. Of course, right, we bounced actually pretty much directly off the 21 EMA, which is actually quite bullish. That's a decent sign. But we are also facing a huge resistance above us. So we're kind of like stuck in this little wedge. So we'll see what happens with that. Personally, like I said before, I wouldn't be surprised if we have one more kind of drawdown, and then we'll see what happens with that. Ultimately, guys, again, like I said, I'm ultimately waiting to see a breakout of this wedge that we are currently in, which is still technically a bear wedge, but I'm waiting for a breakout in either direction. And before I make like any like real moves, if you will, though I'm very tempted to make some good moves next week. But nonetheless, that's what I'm kind of waiting for. That's what I'm expecting, and I'm being very patient on. I'm taking very little trades. So until we break out to either the north or the south of this wedge, I personally think it doesn't hurt to be patient, a little bit cautious and whatnot. But nonetheless, the fact that we are above the 21 EMA and pretty much bounce right off of it is actually a decent sign in my opinion. That's not bad at all. But again, because we also have major resistance above us, you got to take that into consideration as well, of course, right? Going over to the Bollinger Band, again, still well above it, which is fantastic. The 50 moving average, we are still getting rejected by it, pretty much lining up exactly with the blue line resistance, which is at 722.5, ending below it again. So that is definitely acting as a little bit of a resistance there. And then, of course, the short-term moving averages, we bounced right off the 10, but we are actually bouncing off the 5 as well. So ultimately, Tesla's not looking that bad. It's actually not looking bad, but because of earnings next week, that can usually change things up quite a bit. That can usually add substantially more volatility. And yeah, but the way I look at it with earnings is usually, if not always, but like maybe 8 out of 10 times, 7 or 8 out of 10 times, if you sell off into earnings, in my opinion, I get a little bit more bullish than bearish and vice versa. If we're running up into earnings, I usually get a little bit more bearish than bullish, right? That's usually how I try to look at earnings. And yeah, that's kind of what I see. So we'll see what happens tomorrow, or next week rather. But if we start selling off, which I think we might, mainly because like this resistance is huge, but there are some pretty decent bullish indicators. The RSI is looking pretty all right, in all honesty, not too bad. We're above like major short-term kind of like momentum indicators that I just showed, right? The, the 21, the 10, the 5, the Bollinger Band. We're pretty much up above all those bad boys except for the 50, which I think is okay for short-term. So it's still pretty mixed, but again, mainly because we are still above this major resistance, unless I can see another daily closure above it, and then ideally a successful retest again, similar to what this should have been. This one should have been, should have stopped around like 730, maybe 720 at best, or at worst rather. It didn't. So I kind of want to see that, but like imagine if we were to cut this red line in half. That's kind of what I want to see, but happen maybe like, let's say here. Maybe we'll have another drawdown and then it'll happen, right? So that's kind of what I'm waiting for before I make any drawdowns. For all we know, this also could be a massive, signal. Again, this kind of candle usually is a signal for a reversal potentially. So that could also lead to a potential sell-off early next week into earnings. And then, from that we can potentially rally if the earnings are fantastic. So you want to always be really cautious, especially with earnings, especially with considering it's Q2 earnings, right? Those are a little bit, weird. So we'll see what comes in with that, but nonetheless, that's kind of what I'm seeing. Let's take a look at the shorter time frame, though. This can maybe give us a little bit of a better idea as to what we can expect, of course, in the shorter time frame. So you can see we are just pretty much just getting hard rejected by the blue line, right? We just really don't want to move above it. The bears are coming in when it matters, so kind of give them a chance still, if you will. Ultimately, the RSI is looking a little bit messy, but it's nothing too crazy. The RSI is just kind of following the way the chart's moving. There's no real like obvious bearish or bullish divergence in my opinion. So I wouldn't really put too much weight on this RSI at the very moment. It's not showing anything too crazy. It's just kind of following the way the stock is moving, which usually is not really a bearish or a bullish sign. It's pretty much a neutral sign. So in my opinion, the RSI here is a little bit useless. Doesn't add a whole lot. If we go to the, let's say 15-minute though, let's take a look at the 15-minute chart here. And you can see it's it's kind of following it normally, right? Again, nothing too crazy. It's kind of just following the way the stock is moving. So nothing too crazy here. The only thing I would potentially consider that you can make an argument for if you're bear, I guess, is that this is kind of like, a sort of like bear kind of flag that we're setting up, like a smaller bear flag right here. This could be a small bear flag, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? This could have been the fourth touch point this morning, actually. And now we can potentially break down from this bear flag. So essentially, the way I would look at this on the shorter time frame is if at any point we pretty much lose 700 at this point, honestly. If we lose 700 early next week, I would expect this to be a breakdown to the south side of this bear flag. And this will ultimately probably put us down somewhere to around like 650-ish. Right? And that's actually pretty interesting. And I actually would not be surprised to see that, mainly because that would still maintain us within this wedge that we are currently in. Right? So if we go down to like 650-ish, right, it will pretty much put us down somewhere around this general level down here, which will be pretty much at the bottom part of this wedge, which would coincide pretty nicely. I expect some decent support in this area right here if we come down to like, 660, 650, somewhere in that range. And then potentially bounce off of that to the north side, right? That's very possible. So that's something I would definitely be looking out for early next week, right? That kind of little bear flag, that little bit of a bear flag that I just showed you guys. I'm actually going to keep it. I'm going to actually draw it again, and I'm actually going to keep it. But I want to change the color on it, right? Let's go. So it doesn't, because there'll be too much blue. It kind of looks a little messy. Something like this, right? It doesn't have to be exactly perfect, but this just kind of gives you a little bit of a better idea as to what you can expect. I'm not going to draw the pole because we don't really care about the pole. What we really care about is the actual kind of zone, essentially, if you will, that we are currently in, which is something like this, right? Give or take, roughly. Again, the idea here is early next week, if we lose 700, like the very low 700s, that's when the potential breakdown from this bear flag can occur, which I wouldn't be too surprised to see, right? I would not be too surprised to see. Again, that is a 4-point. We already touched 4 points, again, being 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll see what happens with that, right? We'll see what happens with that. That's definitely something, in my opinion, that's like a pretty hot watch, and I would definitely be, if I were you, paying attention to that for sure for tomorrow. So the last thing you want to always take a look at, of course, guys, is going to be the weekly, right? How does the weekly kind of look like? And in all honesty, it actually doesn't look that bad. It is red, so it's not that bad because it shows an insane amount of buying pressure down here, right? It's essentially setting up like not the best looking hammer candle, but it's kind of there. It's a little bit of a janky hammer candle, but it's there. But the issue is also it's red. That's the part that's like kind of neutralizing it. So there's the bullish part is the fact that there's a lot of buying pressure. It's kind of looking like a hammer candle. The bearish part is the fact that it still ended red, and it's not like enough buying pressure, in my opinion, to make it like a real nice, beautiful looking hammer candle. Like a beautiful hammer looking candle, in my opinion. See if I can find one here very quickly without taking up too much time. Can't really find. Oh, here, perfect. This is exactly kind of what you want to see, more or less, right? This right here, this candle right here, this one right here. That's a hammer. That's a beautiful looking hammer candle. And look what happened after that, right? So this is kind of what you want to see in a hammer candle, right? Beautiful buying pressure, very nice long wick. It could have been even longer, but nice long wick, much longer. Usually you want this to be like a decent amount longer than the actual candle, the thickness, if you will, the candle itself, which is great. And being green and it ending near the top of the overall, like the full candle, including the wick and the shadow and whatnot. Beautiful. This is exactly like a very textbook looking hammer candle. That's what you kind of want to see. And this is what we kind of have instead, right? So you can see the difference and kind of what I'm talking about, right? So that's kind of, you know, something to keep in mind as well, guys. And the final thing I also want to take a look at is, of course, the MACD on the weekly. It's actually starting to curl up a little bit. It's looking a little bit more and more bullish, which is actually pretty decent, right? It's making higher lows, which is fantastic. The blue line is starting to slowly curl up to the orange line, which is slowly potentially signaling a reversal. Still a lot of work to do, in my opinion, though. This is not over yet by any means. There's still a decent amount of work to do. However, it's not looking bad. It's looking like, you know, it's starting to look a little bit more promising than it did before when we were all the way down here, obviously. So that's in itself is not a too bad of a sign. But yeah, guys, that's kind of what I'm seeing at the moment. So let me know what you think down below. A lot of people were also asking me, okay, these are short-term movements, predictions, you know, for the next week or so. But what do you expect to see long-term? Long-term, let's go back to the daily. Long-term, so if we're talking about the next, like, few months, let's say maybe summer, maybe even fall, honestly, pretty much what I'm personally expecting ultimately is, this is my current projection. Again, this is just a guess. Everything is a guess at the end of the day, but from just, you know, an educated guess, if you will, from that kind of standpoint, my current guess is this. I personally think from here we're going to fall back down probably to like 660, 650, probably bounce, potentially break out of this to the north side, which would be fantastic. Ultimately head our way back up to somewhere around maybe the low 800s, high 700s, somewhere around there, which will then ultimately break apart this bull pennant, but then put this kind of a bear flag that we're still in play. And then instead of having this blue line right here, we will be playing these two blue lines instead, which will be a bear flag, which then I ultimately think we will get rejected somewhere up around this 800 level, give or take, somewhere around there. Probably get rejected by that, fall down, most likely get some bounces over here, you know, in the 700 area, probably get show some weakness over here, which will break us down and ultimately bring us back down to the ultimate price target being 550 to 450 range. Because ultimately, guys, I personally think we are actually in this kind of bear flag right here, which is this red line being the pole, kind of almost, maybe you can argue that it's like from here or from here, but ultimately I believe whichever starting point you want to put it at, ultimately I believe that we are ultimately in a bear flag. I do think that that's going to be the main thing to watch out for. I do think that this, even though this pennant might fall apart for the bulls, which is good, and go up to the north side to 800, I still believe that this is going to be an ultimate bear flag that will still probably succeed as a bear flag, which will ultimately mean we will crack down, break out to the south side, and most likely plummet to like 450, 550, somewhere in that general range, which is my ultimate target, which is probably like somewhere late this year or something like that, is my current educated guess, if you will. So yeah, that's it for this video, guys. Last thing to note, very low volume today on a greenish day, where, you know, that's something to consider, of course, as well. So take that as you will, but all in all, let me know what you guys think down below. Again, my personal thought process, my personal play right now is wait for early next week. I expect a drawdown. I expect some fear going into earnings. I expect some red. I expect some pain, mainly, especially, again, if this little mini bear flag that we're in on the intraday kind of it ends up breaking to the south side, which is essentially under 700. If that happens, which I think it will, I'll be looking to sell puts, which is, of course, in a bullish position into earnings, before earnings, while the premium is juiced and like very high. And that's my play. Again, not financial advice, make your own decisions, but that's what I'm currently expecting, and that's what I plan on doing. So yeah, hope you guys have a good weekend, and I'll see you on Monday. Peace.